So my name's Joanna Hardy and I'm a criminal barrister. I prosecute and I defend serious crime in the Crown Courts in England and in Wales. I specialise in defending allegations of a serious sexual nature and serious violent allegations. That means that I often deal with vulnerable witnesses in the course of my work, but I'm primarily a jury trial advocate. So I'm wearing my silly wig and my silly gown and undertaking that work in Crown Courts across the country. So the pandemic has completely changed my job, how I do my job, and my everyday professional life. Before the pandemic is probably the best place to start because the work of a criminal barrister is not static work. And one of the reasons many of us chose this path was because we are never in the same place for long. Before the pandemic, I would go to different Crown Courts. If I wasn't in a trial, probably every single day, sometimes 2 different courts in a day. And if I was in a trial, I'd be in the same place maybe for 5 days, maybe for 5 weeks, but then I'd scoot on to the next court. So it's a very dynamic job, lots of different people every day from lots of different backgrounds and lots of different cases, as you'd expect in a job of this nature. But now I spend most of my time sat here looking at a screen like this one, and it's transformed everything. A lot of the interim hearings in the Crown Court are being held online, very similar setup to how I'm talking to you now. Some hearings are still in person, but they're unusual and they're not particularly pleasant because you're obviously wearing your mask, which on top of a wig and on top of the bands that we wear and on top of a gown is quite a lot of extra clothing in court when you're doing quite a serious job already, but it's obviously for everyone's safety. So mainly sitting here, jury trials, which are my bread and butter, they're what I do, they're what I love doing, and they're what I'm trained to do. They halted back in March. They've slowly begun to resume, but a lot of my work involves quite long litigation, so trials that are of some length, and many of them have been moved back. So I'm hoping that my first post-pandemic jury trial will be in November, but I'm not sure. Which means that I would have been out of action from the job I love really for quite some months. So it's transformed it completely, not for the better, but it's obviously important that we keep going in any way that we can. So the people who I represent really are the main people who my focus is on. If I'm defending in a case and my client is on bail, then that means that they're still in the community awaiting their trial date, and they have been impacted mainly in terms of the waiting times. Many people on bail now probably won't see a trial until the end of 2021, maybe the start of 2022 in some busy courts, depending on the priority of the crime involved. And so mainly it's the wait, and being accused of a crime and being the victim of a crime don't share much in common. But the one thing they probably do share in common is the desire to resolve the issue. I think that if you're the victim of a crime, no one wants to wait longer than they have to see justice being done. And if you've been accused of a crime, no one wants to wait longer than they have to tell their side of the story to a jury, whatever the outcome may be. For my clients who are remanded in custody awaiting trial, so they are people who are innocent, they're presumed innocent until a trial can be held and a jury says otherwise. They have had a huge impact placed upon them by the pandemic. Firstly, prison conditions have been appalling. A lot of them have been on 23-hour lockdown. So I don't know if anyone's ever sat in whatever the smallest room in your house is, probably your bathroom. If you just go and sit in there for 2 minutes, for 10 minutes, doing not a lot, it's quite a long time. And then imagine doing that for 23 hours a day. It's a long time. And they've not been able to see their families, which whatever the outcome of their case, whether they're guilty or not guilty, the truth is that families are stabilising factors to reduce reoffending. And so everyone should have an interest in keeping those family ties there, no matter what their view of people who are accused of crime. So they've been impacted doubly, and they can't see their lawyers very easily. Part of my job is going into prisons. Usually I spend a good portion of my life going in and out of prisons to visit people who are on remand. I haven't been able to do that, and the only way I can see them again is on a link like this one. But the queue for a link like this in prison is so long so as to be useless. The earliest slot at some prisons is now after Christmas, and I'm speaking in mid-October. So the impact on the people that I work with in terms of my clients on bail in custody has been devastating. And when I prosecute on behalf of society, on behalf of complainants of crime, similarly, there are people who are waiting for very serious allegations that where they've been wronged and where they've been harmed to be resolved, and they're in a queue, and so it's impacted people universally. So I'm sure that most sectors wouldn't call this an innovation, but for the criminal courts, which have been living in the sort of dinosaur years for as long as they possibly could get away with, just having online hearings, I think, is the biggest innovation that we've seen, and having them regularly. Before the pandemic, we'd occasionally see a barrister dialing in from another court, and it would all be quite exotic and quite glamorous because someone had managed to use the internet. But now we've actually used it for a number of interim hearings for a number of months now. So it's a real shift for us, and it's a real shift for the judiciary. It's a real shift for court staff. The difficulty is that it often doesn't work, and so whilst it is an innovation, it's one that it has been poorly, in my view, poorly executed, underfunded, and has been quite underwhelming. But I really hope that they can work at it, because if they can get it right, it could transform the way that we work. So I think the question for the criminal justice system won't be, should we carry on using online hearings or should we scrap them? I think the question will be, where do we draw the line? Because they're so useful and they have real potential that the question really for us in this particular sector will be, where do we stop? Because we can have interim hearings that are just lawyers talking to each other online because it makes sense. And previously, regularly, I drive for 3 or 4 hours to speak to a judge for 15 minutes. And hopefully those days will be behind us, and we'll keep the online hearings for that. But there's a debate to be had. Should I be in court in person if I'm representing somebody at a sentencing hearing, for example? So there's no jury. It's just me and the judge and my client and the prosecutor. But should I be there? Should I be in the room addressing them in person because someone's liberty is at stake? I take the view on balance that once the pandemic has passed, that I probably should be. Other barristers might disagree with me. Similarly, we've been using the links for a long time now for vulnerable witnesses. A lot of vulnerable witnesses find giving evidence over the link a lot less intimidating because the jury isn't immediately there, and if a defendant has harmed them or wronged them or is generally going to interrupt with their ability to give their best evidence, then the link has proven to be a really good tool. But it's not a good tool for everybody with vulnerabilities. Some people find it to be difficult. Some people find it alienating. Some people, I do a lot of work with intermediaries and with young people who need additional support to concentrate and to understand in court. And because young people are so used to screen time, they often associate screen time with leisure time. And so for me, the real question is going to be, where do we draw the line for who? Who can it help? Who might it hinder? And particularly with jury trials, the temptation at the moment, we have this huge problem with how do we get jury trials up and running at capacity, not how do we get them up and running at all, but how do we regain capacity? And the almost irresistible conclusion is, well, online hearings work really well, but there's been a huge backlash and debate about that. I take the view that jury trials should be in the room, subject to any vulnerabilities, any links that need to be set up on an ad hoc basis. I think the primary rule should be that juries should be in the room to see the evidence, to feel the evidence, and to assess things. So for me, I hope the innovation we keep is online hearings, but I hope that we draw the lines in all of the right places. I think funding in better tech, I alluded to it earlier in one of my answers to you, but the truth of the matter is that we've got people in custody who can't see their lawyers from mid-October until after Christmas, and that's not good enough when all that we're asking for is a screen, essentially. And so investments needed in providing screens, tech, personnel who can run that tech in prisons, because it's absolutely no good having an army of barristers equipped with the technology to speak to their clients if there's nothing at the other end. It's like having a tin can on a string, but there's nothing to talk to. And so we must really invest there if we're serious about utilising technology to see people who are remanded by the state. Criminal litigation is quite fast paced, things can change quite quickly. And it's no good me only being able to talk to my client at a huge time lag of weeks or months, because they might need to make a decision about their case and their life and their liberty in quite short order. And so for it to reflect the practical reality of the job it's trying to assist, the next 6 to 12 months really need huge investment and creative thought really about that. If I can sneakily put in a second one, I'm sure that you'll tell me I can't, but if I can, then I think some level of creativity with jury trials is needed. I think that we've opened some Nightingale courts, and one of them is in the Lowry Theatre in Manchester, which is a really good use of space. It's an industry that needs to be occupied and to be assisted, and we're a sector that needs space and safe spaces to hold jury trials, and it's a natural combination. And my question is, why is that the only theatre being used? Originally, people were asking for hundreds of Nightingale courts, and we've got a handful running in what is now a long time. So I think hard funding where the tech is helping, and creative thought where the tech can't help us. I think what I'd really like to say is thank you to the court staff who have managed in a pandemic to juggle criminal litigation that was originally conducted by footfall and by people walking into their courtrooms and performing advocacy, to somehow arranging Skype links, phone links, prison video links, online platform links, barristers that can't work the technology, barristers that are in their car, pulled over parking, doing hearings at the last minute. They've organised judges who have to appear from home because they might be shielding. They've managed to get the tech working, not in one case, which I think would be a big job for anyone, to sort out all of those moving parts, but in a full list, they've managed to just try their best to keep it going. And I've received invites from court staff to hearings the next day at 10 o'clock at night, at 11 o'clock at night, where they're still going. And I think they're the real unsung heroes of this pandemic. I think that often people see judges and they often see barristers speaking and writing about the criminal justice system. But there's a whole army of people out there who have genuinely had to go into a building every day when they'd probably rather not. And they've genuinely had to go over and above their job and their job description for the good of others. And that might be for complainants who are waiting for things to get on. It might be for defendants in custody. It might be for their families. It might be for barristers who are shielding. And that's all I really wanted to say extra. I think we've covered everything else, but they really are the unsung heroes of this entire pandemic, because they've kept the show on the road as best they can in the constraints that we've been given.